what if we were in this multiverse instead of the other one, and kind of this is how it happened. So that could be really cool. That like
To explain the characters being different characters as well.
right, exactly. So you could say, oh yeah, well this happened because of that, or this or whatever, so on and so forth. And so those are the types of things that I think are pretty cool that they can do with this show, which I thought was just going to be like, oh, a fun look at it, but might actually be like, well, hey, this stuff is happening elsewhere. And not only that, but then you could turn around and say, well, that stuff could come back at some point in a movie, let's say. You're not necessarily going to have the zombie MCU, but like, but you could have different things come up in a movie because like, oh yeah, that's from a different multiverse and stuff. So,
well, and Razin, he brings up a good point. He says in the comments, but doesn't Eternals take place after the events of Endgame? How they know what just happened in Loki? Well, if you remember Loki, that happened in Endgame as well, where he picked up the Tesseract and then was confronted by the TVA as well. And we know the TVA, time works mysteriously. This could have been hours on Earth as we know it, or whatever. We don't know how long this actually has taken place within the universe that we know. What's happened in Loki. So that's one way that it could actually, take place before the Eternals. Who knows? I mean, that's one question. It's a great question to ask because again, with the TVA, there's so many questions still to ask about, how long are these people? How long have they been in there? Because if you looked at it, Ravenna was pruned in 2018, and here we are, 2021. We know we're in 2021. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, recognizes what year we're in. So with that being said, how did she climb the ranks so high to be the head person there in just 3 years? Well, what if that 3 years has been, an eternity there, but on Earth, it's only been 3. So, the question with the TVA remains, how long?
Right. She also says, when Mobius says you betrayed me, by the way, I think we're in 2023 now, according to them, because it's 5 years after 18, I believe. I might be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case.
Emily brings up a good point, too. Loki set up as a Battle of New York.
Right.
Because the Avengers going back in time during Endgame. So this could have the time, it moves in mysterious ways.
But remember now what Ravenna said to Mobius. So Mobius said, you betrayed me to Ravenna. And Ravenna said, no, you betrayed me. She's like, eons of friendship thrown away for 2 Lokis. Eons of friendship. She got brought there in 2018. Like, what do you mean eons of friendship? It's been 5 years, but that's one of those. And again, 5 years, but if he gets pulled out of 2012, so now you're like, well, wait a second. So it's this whole thing,
Not correct math.
I mean, it's why, but that, no, what I'm saying to you is that
2018 to 2021?
No, 2023, bro. We're in 2023. But because Endgame happens in 2023.
Okay.
But, this is where the time gets crazy because Loki supposedly gets taken in 2012 after, right? But then it's like, well, she didn't get taken until 2018. He gets taken in 2012. Like, what's going on here? Like, how can so that's where it's like, okay, wait a second. Like, we're not just, so there's all sorts of other issues going on. And so that's really interesting about how, like, time just and Emily said, like, time moves differently in TV. It just does. Like, that's the way it works. And if you think about, too, like, okay, well, it's a 2012. They went back in time in 2012, but it was really 2023 when they did it. So then he left and it was like 23, but it's like 12. And you're like, wait a second. Wait a second. So, but it's interesting. I mean, that's, so there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a lot of questions that we don't know the answers to. I just find it so fascinating to see where they can go with this because there's so many directions that you can now take this to say, okay, this is where we're going next, or this is how we can explain the multiverse. I mean, the multiverse is literally unlimited. Like, you could do anything with it. And that's a great thing, but it's also a bad thing because there's so much opportunity to do everything. And it's like at a certain point, and Juliana, who's in the chat right now, or in the audience right now, said to me earlier, she's like, I don't mind them going deep, But like when my head starts to hurt when I'm trying to just understand what's going on in the movie, that's not good. Like that's not where you want to be, right? I love Tenet. I love Christopher Nolan. Like I think what Nolan does is great, but like you don't want your next Marvel movie to play like Tenet. You just don't, because like yeah,
Well,
I understand it. I liked it. I loved it actually, but a lot of people are like I don't get it. You don't want
so
that.
you're
You don't want
you're
people walking away saying that. You know?
you're familiar with this phrase, Pat, because we use it often. But I'm just going to replace the name. In Feige, we trust. Right? I mean, so far everything he's done has just been absolutely amazing. There have been a couple clunkers here and there, but for the most part, even the clunkers still have amazing parts and good storylines to them. So I'm not worried. I think they have a concrete plan of what they want to do and what's going to happen. So I'm not worried about him making it too complicated. It's still superhero movies. They still want to make it so if you didn't watch the TV shows, you're still kind of introduced on what's going on. And but for us, big Marvel geeks, I think there's going to be things that we notice, we see, and we hear that we're like, oh, that happened in Loki, or that happened in Scarlet Witch, or that happened, with the new, Sam's getting a Captain America standalone movie, so we're gonna get a brand new Captain America movie. He's leveling up, so there's gonna be things that we look back and we're like, oh, that was in Falcon Winter Soldier. So there's going to be things for us specifically, but for the general audience that goes, there's still going to be, it's still. I'm not worried about him making it too complicated for everyone to understand. You want to grab some people up here?
Yeah, let's do it. Anyone wants to say anything while
Smash that request button.
waiting, I will say some of the things that I thought were really cool. Number one, the cracks in the castle or wherever they were cool, and it looked like something they did. I don't remember if it was Japan or China. I think it was China, way back in the day when they used to fill, like when something broke, they would fix it with gold, and that looked very reminiscent of that, which shows status and power and things like that, which I thought was interesting. That was really cool. And then if you go back and watch that interaction that they have between Loki and Sylvie and He Who Remains, there's if you look anytime they show Loki and Sylvie together sitting in the chairs, there's a big crack down the floor in between them, almost like there's a crack developing between the two of them, which was just really cool, kind of foreshadowing as to what was going to happen. But let's hear some from some other people. Emily, what's up, guys? How's it going?
What's up, man? How you doing? What's up, guys?
Hello.
Man, hi, Em. How you doing? I don't even know where to start in terms of the amount of theories that are just spinning in my head after that finale. Even after a week of trying to digest this thing, I don't know. There's so many directions that they can go, but I think the one thing I come back to is that they've committed to Kang being the big bad for this next, I don't know, 15 to 20 movie run.
Oh, I
And I
don't I
think
don't agree with that.
you don't think so?
No, I think he'll be a big bad, but you got to remember we're getting Fantastic Four soon, as
So you think
well.
it's
We'll
going to
get
lead
that
into
in what
Doom?
it could be. There could be a transition to Doom as well. Plus, we're getting. It seems I don't know if you guys saw the photo or whatever that Hugh Jackman posted, but it was
Yeah.
a picture of him and Kevin Feige,
Yep.
and we might be getting Hugh Jackman Wolverine and the X-Men sooner than we think, and we know some of the big bads in X-Men as well. So I'm not sure. We might have multiple big bads, but I think Kang for right now, for the short term, he's probably going to be the guy that everyone's worried about. But I'm not sure I don't think the next 20 movie phase, this next phase of like 20 movies like we had with the last one is going to be primarily
So do you
Kang. I
think
think they might
do you
introduce
th-
more.
do you think he'll be more like how Loki kind of was to the start of the Marvel universe, where he showed up in a couple of different movies, different cameos and whatnot. Obviously in Thor, and then kind of pushed the plot line forward with how am I blanking out here? But the first Avengers movie plus more, like he kind of like lingered throughout. Do you think that's what Kang would be?
Right, he like
I,
set
I
the stage for bringing the heroes together in the first place at the
Right.
beginning of the
yeah.
film series.
So
I
maybe they're
think
doing the same thing with Kang, right? Like I don't know.
I think we might see more of like a Spider-Man, like original Spider-Man, or like the that kind of thing where there was a big villain for every movie. I don't think this is what we're going to see, a big villain for every movie, but I think for every few movies there might be a big villain, and then there might be another big villain, and then or maybe maybe a team up. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that Fantastic Four, they have a plethora of big guys. They've got Galactus, Annihilus, obviously Doctor Doom. There's multiple big bads they can introduce as well. I mean, and Marvel still has a bunch of big bads too that they can introduce. So I don't know. I just don't see him being the 20 movie build up to this big thing. I think they might move a little bit faster with this villain here. I think we've seen the big bad setup, throughout a whole thing with the Infinity Stones and everything. I think we might see something a little bit more of a fast play with Kang. Not to dumb him down as a villain, but there's so much material to work with other, and especially bringing X-Men in, there's so much to work with. I think his time as a villain might not be as long as Thanos's.
Well, I think not just because of the other material, but because they really didn't take a lot of time to lay the groundwork and introduce the character to us in the first place. Like, think of how long it took for us to even know who Thanos was.
Yeah.
So
I think to be fair though, like to kind of push back on both of that, I think this was laying the groundwork to a certain extent. Like, this one episode was giving us a foundation because it's at least introducing us to one of the many variants. And to Josh's point about Fantastic Four and maybe potentially Doom being a possibility for being the big bad later on, like, there's also a version of Kang where he's Doom in the comics. So maybe they go that route where like another variant of Kang ends up being Doom. Now that would maybe be convoluted because it'd be two characters, one actor playing the same thing. But I don't know. There's
Not
so many
necessarily.
Yeah.
but they don't all
Because
have
we
to
have
look
we
the
have
same.
multiple Lokis that all
Right.
look different, sound different, talk different.
True.
So it could be
Yeah.
a variant of Kang that comes over who takes the role of Doom. I mean, that could be a possibility.
Right, like we have Loki. Some of the Lokis look identical. Like we saw President Loki looked exactly like the one we're familiar with. And then there were others that looked different. And clearly that's the same here with He Who Remains and whoever is, I mean, I think it's supposed to be Kang, but whoever is supposed to be depicted in the statue that's at the end of the series. They look identical, but it doesn't mean that every version or variant of them look the same way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So
I have a question too. Did we ever find out who bought Avengers Tower? I can't remember.
I
don't
think
remember.
I read something that it becomes Kang Industries or something, or Kang something. I think it ends up in his hands.
Yeah, I don't think they specifically say who he
Not,
who he sells it
not
to
in the
in the
show.
MCU.
I
They
mean, there's
do
so many
show
different
it.
There's so many different
Yeah, there's
Oscorp,
Oscorp.
Roxxon.
Yeah.
You have
Roxxon.
Kang. What was the? We talked about
Wait,
this
didn't
last.
it in the last Spider-Man movie? Didn't it end up being Oscorp? Or am I thinking that? Or am I just imagining that?
I'm not sure. I
I
don't
don't
know. But
I don't think so.
also could be the Baxter Building too. Like this is just, that's what I'm, with the multiverse opening. I don't know. There's just my brain goes a mile a minute trying to think of what's going to happen here. I don't know if y'all feel the same way, but I'm just overwhelmed at this point. Kevin, damn you!
Well, I mean, it's true, and then you got to think about, like, the big thing for me is that when you look at the beginning of the MCU, and and Emily mentioned like how long it takes to get there, right? To get to Thanos, and we don't even know who Thanos is until the very end of Avengers, and then we see him, and still, for people who didn't read the comic book, still have no idea what the hell it is, right? And so you're like, and then he doesn't appear in Ultron at all. And doesn't have
Guardians
anything
of the
to do with Ultron.
Galaxy is the first time we find out who
Right, you don't
kind of
even
Thanos
hear
is.
his name until Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it is going to be interesting. We know who Kang is. Obviously, we've been told that Kang is going to be the bad guy in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We already know that. He hasn't necessarily been they still haven't said his name, right? Obviously, Loki, we know that the character who plays him is there. Different person, right? As Razine said in the comments, like, different person, different character than He Who Remains. but we know that it's going to be the same guy. So